Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Lots of students in the room. It's very exciting to see this auditorium, almost full of 300 people, enthusiasts. Thanks for your support. Thanks for being here today. Thanks to our keynotes who have traveled far. We are about a few hours away from Web Summit. Very exciting week in Portugal. We haven't seen so much excitement around entrepreneurship and innovation and a new breed of entrepreneurs that will change the planet, hopefully for the better. Right, thank you very much, everyone. We have 7 exciting teams today to pitch. Hopefully you'll enjoy what you'll see. You'll learn something. You can share something. You're invited to ask questions, to engage with these entrepreneurs. The session is being web streamed all over the world, and there's more audience than the ones here in this room. I'll start with just a quick overview of the year highlights. So I'm excited to share with you that in this year, I was checking the statistics this morning. In a year, BGI alumni have raised just over 30 million euro, in fact, close to 31 million euro. I mean, coming from a small country for Portugal, this is a very exciting, big number, very big number. And I think the best is still to happen. We have a great new batch of 7 teams that will be soon joining the other alumni. We have 19 BGI alumni teams selected for Web Summit. So there are 67 companies or ventures in Portugal that will represent Portugal in Web Summit next week. So 19 of those are from BGI. This is very exciting. You were one of those guys, so there are several here in the room as well. So that's very exciting. Hopefully you'll get good traction, good networking there as well. That's very exciting, either in the alpha or beta programs. 75 Acti alumni, we're still sticking to 66%, close to 70% survival rate. So it means that as an accelerator, we are doing our job rather well, I'd say. We would like the statistics to get to 100%, but we know that in high-tech new ventures, there's lots of risk involved, and this will never be the case. It's not possible. But we're trying to do our job well with the talent that the teams bring to the table and be able to hopefully build great products that can go out to the world and be great companies. Right. So these are the stage is mainly for the 7 teams that will be presenting. It's an opportunity for you guys to pitch, to sell yourselves, and obviously get feedback, hopefully from interesting partners, potential customers, but also investors eventually. And this is something that is very important for high-tech or technology-based companies. Fuel equals money. So that's very important for the early stages of building a company. So these companies are eager to pitch today, so I won't be long, and I'll turn over to our keynote soon. Some of our investors are listed here. This is just a selected bunch of investors, Portuguese VCs, Portuguese angels. We want to be hyper-connected, and this is BGI model. Hyper-connected from a small country to the world, where we can make a difference and work in partnerships to scale these companies. You can see several sources of capital, from non-dilutive to top-tier investors, some of whom are in the room today. We don't have any yet with HP Ventures, Vitali. I'm looking forward to those discussions and potentially partnerships, scaling up some of these companies to California and from there to the world. Right, so before I turn over to our keynotes, I just want to thank Ishkte, our shareholder, a founding shareholder, who had the bold vision of creating a new economic reality for Portugal from our science, talent, and technology-based entrepreneurs from universities and research centers. We've been very lucky to work with top institutions at MIT who have coached us to get to where we are today. And some of our sponsors, I should stress the role of Caixa Capital, Caixa Geral de Depósitos, who has been a very generous donor to support our initiatives, and of course there's cost to what we're doing. There's sunk costs, and hopefully some of these exits that we'll have in the future will be able to overcome this cost and return many multiples. In fact, when you look at the cost of BGI in the last 7 years, and you divide it by the number of investments raised, is over 30x. And that's already a kind of economic leverage that is interesting to start looking at. Right, with this said, I'm very happy to introduce our keynote speakers, one of whom has traveled far. Vitaly Kolom is based in Silicon Valley and is trying to innovate a new reality for a very old company, one of the first pioneer companies right from a garage in Silicon Valley, Hewlett-Packard. And Vitaly has a lot to tell us about what's coming, what's this interesting turning point of new emerging realities that will change the way we will relate to many activities in the future, and I'll let Vitaly tell us about that. Carlos Silva is also an emblematic person, co-founder of crowdfunding platform called Seeders, and Seeders is an interesting case of these born global companies. Portuguese co-founder, a UK co-founder that get together, and in fact the company is based in London as well. And interestingly, the largest crowdfunded Portuguese company is also a BGI alumni, interestingly, eSolidar, from 3 editions ago. So they're building a new alternative source of supporting early stage ventures in different verticals. So these will be our keynote speakers, and then we'll turn over the stage to the most important, which is the talent that is in the room, the startuppers that are eager to tell you about their ventures. And after that, I'll invite everyone to come over downstairs for a glass of port, and hopefully lots of mingling, lots of networking, lots of interaction, and learning each other with this great talent that we've got in the room. With that, Vitaly, thank you very much for being here with us. You flew from Porto in the morning, and you're flying back to Porto this evening, and after that you're flying back to Lisbon for Web Summit, yes, right?
Yes,
thank you.
Flying. All right. All right, so I think I'll need the clicker, and if you can get the presentation up. So good afternoon, everybody. Just to have an idea of who's in the room, how many are undergrad students? Okay. How many are grad students? Anything beyond that? Okay, just entrepreneurs? Okay, how many of you have started a company before? Okay. Mentors don't count. How many are you planning? How many of you are planning to start a company soon? Okay. All right. So hopefully I will give you a little bit of an idea of where you should be working, what areas. So I'm sure most of you are too young to remember this movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but it's Keanu Reeves' first movie. So before Bill and Ted, there was Bill and Dave, Hewlett-Packard. So HP is Silicon Valley's first startup. 1939, first round of investment was $538. First customer was Disney. So my job now, since joining HP in March, is to find kind of our fourth iteration of HP. And today the company actually split about a year ago into 2, and we're the little brother, HP Inc. We only have 50,000 employees. We'll do about 55 billion revenue in the next year, and we sell into 178 countries through 250,000 channel partners. And we are in 3 businesses. So we're in printing, in 3D printing, and I'll tell you much more about that, and in personal computers. So we lead the world in personal computers, both in commercial and consumer, same thing in the 2D printing world. So we'll see what happens in 3D. So, but I'm not here to give you an HP commercial. I'm here to talk about you and the founders in the room, or the future founders in the room. So, normal career path that all your parents are going to tell you, and the reason you went to college probably, is so you can get good grades, get into a good college like this, then get into a good company with your good degree, and get regular promotions, then one day retire, play golf, and die. Right? So that's the American dream with the golf part. You can insert your hobby, whatever you like to do. So that's a normal career path that has been going on since the Industrial Revolution, let's say. But it's changed a bit, right? Startups are kind of the new sexy thing. And everybody thinks that a startup career path is very easy. You read about these companies that are greatly successful overnight. Reality is the path is much more difficult than you'll see, right? This is a very treacherous, very difficult path. So I'm here to warn you. So, as one of my favorite quotes, Ben Horowitz, as a startup CEO, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. Right? So this is, I can tell you from a lot of first-hand experience, this is very, very true. Right? So startups take a long time. You might end up looking like Gandalf here one day, working on your startup. So it takes about a year to develop an idea and another year or so to see if anybody cares. If it's a product, if it's something that somebody wants to buy. If you're successful, it's going to take 5 to 8 years of your life to go through this process. So let's do some math. How many of you are about 22 here? Right? Or a little bit before 22? Right? Okay. So for a lot of you in the room, you'll see that maybe you'll start your first startup right after college, and you will likely fail. Right? It'll take you a couple years to go through it. It'll be painful and not fun in some ways, but you'll learn a lot and you'll fail. You might go back to grad school, you might go work for a big company, you'll be a little bit smarter. On the second one, you'll fail faster, right, within a year. That's kind of typical path. So on the third one, maybe you've gotten a little bit more experience, maybe it'll get a lot further. You'll spend 5 years of your life on it. Congratulations, you're in your early 30s. And the next one will take you to your mid-30s, at which point life's other priorities take over, and you're going to spend time with your family, you're going to go get that big corporate job, and your startup time is done for a lot of people, okay? So this is the reality of it. It takes a lot of time, a lot of non-refundable lifetime. You can always make more money, you can always do a lot of other things, but you'll never get more time, right? So my goal and job, I feel, as a mentor, is to help you get through this journey and improve your odds of success. And to do that, not everything is a mystery. There are a lot of things that you can learn from experience, but you can also learn from others' experience as well. So we'll talk about real quick 3 different things: how, where, and what to work on. Okay? So let's talk about how. So a startup is an experiment in search of a business model. Building a startup is much closer to the scientific method than it is to running a small business. Okay? Think about that for a second. A startup is not a small version of a large company. It is an experiment, okay, at the very first stage. So what you're looking for is a business model. You're looking for a business model, you're looking for who your customers are, how to sell to them, all of these things. You're looking to then start building a repeatable sales model, and then you start realizing what business you're in, and you can start building a management system around that, okay? Then you get into probably the most exciting time in your startup life, which is the transition period. This is where you're going from a startup idea to growing up into a real company, right? And what will happen is, right around the time you break even or become profitable, you're at about 150 people, you start hiring managers that are experienced and have gray hair, you become a company, okay? This is the path. So the goal is not to be a startup founder forever. The goal is not to keep going to Web Summit every year and tell everybody that you're a startup founder and give out a CEO business card of a 1-person or 2-person company. The goal is for you to figure out the business and graduate and become a company, and then later become an enterprise, a large company that's dominant in the category. This is what we look for. All right, so if we get a little bit academic, and what better place? Right, if we look at Clayton Christensen's technology lifecycle S-curve, for a long time, each technology goes through this period of research, right? So we're spending a lot of time and money into a new technology, and we can't build a product on it yet, right? It's too early to invest. This is where large companies, labs are investing time and money. This is where university research comes in. And at a certain point, there's a sweet spot. The technology is ready for the market is ready for the technology. This is when you build your startup, okay? And that window is very short. It's only a few years for each technology. And at a certain point, it becomes mature, right? You probably wouldn't start a new social network today, but it was a very hot idea 10 years ago, right? You probably wouldn't start a new mobile phone company either. There's a lot of things you wouldn't do, and I also would not recommend that you invest the next 5 to 8 years of your life into a dog walking app, right? That's kind of done. We'll come back to that. So what makes startups very special type of new business is that they go through staged financing, right? This is what makes startups a lot different from small businesses. Small businesses, the model is pretty much figured out. You can read a book, you can go buy a book that says, how to open a restaurant, how to open a hotel, how to start a consulting company. You just follow steps 1 through 1,000,000 and you got yourself a business. Startups, by definition, you are inventing a new business. You're solving a problem in a new way. You're using new technology to solve an old boring problem, right? So you have to invent your business. And in that course, you're going to be losing money for a little while, right? And at a certain point, you're going to start making money, go positive, hopefully break even, and then hit escape velocity. I'll tell you a little secret, most companies don't get there. But if you overlay the staged financing of how venture capitalists look at these types of special companies, is if you have a concept, you can raise seed capital. You get your first customers, you can raise Series A. You start understanding what business you're in, you start scaling, you start adding subsequent rounds of financing, on and on and on. And you get to predictable scale, and that's when you go public, right? So this is very academic. This is ideal world. No company goes through the smooth path. Usually, it looks something like this, right? And there's lots of different financing and bridge financing and all sorts of problems you'll have to solve. But this is what a startup is supposed to do, okay? Now, if we look at Silicon Valley since the 1960s, you'll see that there have been a lot of different technology S-curves, and there have been a lot of big companies built on those S-curves, right? So for example, integrated circuits gave us Fairchild, well, first of all, Shockley, then Fairchild, then Intel, National Semiconductor, AMD, these huge names. This is when these companies were born. If you look at personal computing, I mean, HP got into the personal computing business in the early 70s, right? As well as IBM, etc. These companies existed before. And of course, Apple in the mid-70s, Microsoft, and on and on and on. And you can see some of these S-curves that received a lot of money from investors never matured into big businesses, not yet at least. So the question is kind of what's next? And this is the reason that investors are going after buzzwords. Right? You hear all the buzzwords now, AI, VR, drones, all these things. Because that technology has reached a point where we're going to see the next enterprises, the next billion-dollar companies built on this wave, right, in each one of those technologies. So where? We're obviously not in Silicon Valley, right? And it's important to understand what an innovation cluster is, right, and what in each ecosystem needs. So on any given day, there is any number of groups from different governments, from different universities, from all over the world that come to Silicon Valley, and we like to call that the Silicon Valley petting zoo. So they come over, they'll go and take pictures with the Facebook sign, they'll go take pictures in front of the Apple office, Google, etc. They'll go feel the innovation. And everybody's trying to replicate Silicon Valley, which is impossible to do because it was something that was uniquely built over the course of more than 50 years, or 60 years at this point. So an innovation cluster can exist anywhere. Certainly you need entrepreneurs. Certainly you need venture capitalists to invest in those entrepreneurs, but that's not it. You need a lot more than that. You need large companies that are going to invest in R&D in a lot of these new technologies, right? You need them to also be acquirers for a lot of these companies. So most companies don't survive, but the ones that do exit, the small amount that do exit, are companies that are acquired by the larger companies, not the ones that go public, okay? You also need universities, and the role of the universities is to graduate engineers that develop this new technology and that are specialists in certain technology, and they're graduating business students who start doing the sales and marketing part of it. And in Europe in general, Europe is a little bit behind US in sales and marketing knowledge and experience, but engineering is quite strong. Now, here's the secret of Silicon Valley. It's the management layer. So in Silicon Valley, there are about 50,000 director-level managers that have scaled companies from idea to exit before, right? They have that experience that you can't get out of a book. And when companies get to a certain scale and they're trying to go from 20 people to 100 people to 1,000 people, there's really only one place in the world that they can get those those managers that can help them build that company. People that know how to build a sales team. People know how to market this specific type of product, have the relationships, all those things. So this is something that you cannot replicate. And it's going to take multiple generations of entrepreneurs to come back with that experience and gradually, organically grow the ecosystem. You also need professionals. You need lawyers that understand venture capital and how to structure these deals. So you don't sell 90% of your company for 50,000 euros. Right? Anybody have a deal like that they've dealt with? You also need government. So government has a very important role in this world. Government is supposed to create the economic conditions for all of this to work. It's supposed to create the incentives for venture capitalists to invest in these highly, highly risky companies, 80% of whom will fail. And the US government did this. So US government was the first customer of Microwave Valley before it was Silicon Valley. And the Department of Defense was a big, big customer for all these technologies because it was the Cold War and signals intelligence and all these things were very, very important and a big budget item. And I encourage you to read about the history of Silicon Valley. But then the government started bringing East Coast investors who were investing in big companies and big public companies. They were incentivizing them. So venture capital is short for adventure capital because it's so risky. But if you follow the adventure, it could be a lot of fun and it could be lucrative. You'll find the treasure. So all of this lives in large pools of private capital. And this is important. So the private capital, kind of the smart money, right, you'll hear that term if you haven't heard it already, are people that not only can write you a check for your startup, but they can give you advice. They've gone through the experience. And it's really important that in countries like Portugal, which are a relatively small market, it's likely that the companies that become successful and big, the founders will move to the US at some point to scale the company, but it's very important that they come back with their experience, with their money, to invest in the next generation. And the next generation in startup world is about 5 to 10 years. All right, so it goes quick. And then of course the public stock market is the target. Everybody's investing money because they think at some point this company has a chance of exiting. Odds are that it will be bought by a larger company, but you need to have this ability to go liquid, right? So take your stock and turn it back into cash at some point. So clusters of innovation are very important because they also affect competition, right? And this increases productivity of the companies that are in particular industry. It drives the pace and direction of innovation, and it stimulates the formation of new businesses. So in Portugal, for example, Portugal is known for several different industries, right? In Portugal, you have great, leather goods, shoes, Porto wine, etc., and a lot of different things where it's some of the best in the world, right? Because you have a lot of companies working close to each other, and employees go between companies, or they'll get sick of the big company and go start their own, but they're able to work with the best in the world in their industry, right? Same thing goes for technology. So if we look at top 20 startup ecosystems around the world, Silicon Valley is certainly number 1, but Tel Aviv recently became number 2. And 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago, thank you, when it was a dot-com days, a dot-com boom, Boston was number 2. Now it's number 6. And all of this changes all the time, right? I'm sure most of you know about Estonia. 1.2 million population, because of Skype, is quite a powerhouse. It's outsized in its ability to create great companies because you have so many people that came out of Skype with that experience. You had hundreds of people in such a small country that went through that company's progression, right, from idea to exit. And if you look at US, right, if you think I'm going to get on a plane, fly to San Francisco, and there's going to be somebody holding a big check for me and invest in my company, first of all, Bay Area and San Francisco is the Olympic Games of startups. It's the best of the best in the world. So if you're good here, you're going to arrive there, and it's basically like being in a top university. Everybody around you is very smart and very talented, and you might feel a lot of stress and pressure. But the other part of it is that it's not necessarily the right place for your company. It really depends on what you're working on, right? So if you're working on financial technology, fintech, I'd probably recommend you look at London and New York before you look at Silicon Valley. Or if you're looking at games and entertainment, you would look at LA. There are a lot of clusters around US with a lot of traditional businesses like Detroit and automotive. All of these different clusters that formed over many, many years, right? So it's important to kind of look at, if you're looking kind of from the position of a government, let's say Portuguese government, it's important to help innovate from position of power. So what is Portugal good at? Start building a cluster around that. And the next wave, and we'll get to the what in a second, but the next wave of technology is not all software, right? Silicon Valley started specializing in software for the last 20 years, and a lot of the electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, all of those kind of talents and skill sets are not there, right? So you can actually create a company and get pretty far in other places, right? Develop technologies. It can be born anywhere and be successful. So the what, this is the fun part. What should you be working on? So as I mentioned, you probably shouldn't be working on mobile apps anymore. There are 2 million apps in the iOS App Store, and that's pretty much done. So if you're going to launch an app, it's going to cost you a lot of money to get every user to stand out and get the attention. So you really have to think about where do you look next? What's going to happen next, right? If it's going to take you a couple of years to develop your idea into a product, you really have to think about where is technology going to be in a couple of years, right? You're shooting a rocket, and you need to land on the moon, and the moon is a moving target, right? So hopefully this will help you understand this a little bit. So we look at 4 specific areas. There are other interesting areas, but we look at 4 particular areas. Together we call it the blended reality experiences, and it's hypermobility, Internet of all things, smart machines, and 3D transformation. Right, so I'll talk about each one here. So today we take for granted, and a lot of you were kind of born with Internet already around you. But now we take for granted that we have high-speed mobile internet, we have devices that collect data, everything goes to the cloud. We consider this hypermobility. Well, very, very soon, hypermobility will mean nanocomputers in your bloodstream. Right? This is real. This is coming. I see companies developing this. So all these sensors, everything is going to be inside you and much more real time. Right? 5G internet is coming, which is 100 times faster than what we have. Now, Internet of all things, IoT, is quite a buzzword, and it can mean a couple of different things. It can mean little devices that you buy on Kickstarter that connect and collect some kind of data and improve your life and make something more fun and everything else. But the reality is that every single thing is going to be connected to the Internet very soon. That means that the chair you're sitting on will have an IP address, right? It'll be collecting some kind of data. It might be collecting how many people showed up to the lecture. And if somebody's doing a guest lecture, I can get in contact with all of you or vice versa without exchanging business cards. All of this is coming. And this gives you a huge opportunity to do things up and down the technology stack. That means security, distribution, the devices, all of these things are going to change. And there are going to be a lot of new opportunities for you to look at as far as creating devices. So this is a good example. It's an internet-connected beer package that will reorder itself when you take the last beer. It's very important, right? Convenience. So smart machines, this is basically robotics. So first generation of robotics, we're talking about hydraulic muscles, machines that can replace the physical labor. Now we're talking about smart machines that can make decisions, right? They can make decisions in certain specialized areas, and later will be generalized. So if we look at kind of where artificial intelligence is at this point, all of you know Breakout. It's a classic game. It's a brick wall. You have a little slider and a ball, and you hit it, and it breaks the bricks, right? So a good human player can go through a level very quickly. Some researchers gave an algorithm the ability to play this game and teach itself. So this is called machine learning. And at first, it wasn't very good. But within about 40 minutes or so, it was able to solve the whole level with one hit. It figured out exactly where it needs to hit the ball to beat the entire game, right? This is much better than a human. And this is kind of an experiment, but it's really important now we can apply the same type of technology to more important puzzles. So this is a flat worm, right? This is a worm that's that's kind of a disgusting little animal, but it has a very special power. It can regenerate itself, right? So if you cut it in half, it's going to grow the tail again. And scientists could not figure out for over 40 years, they're trying to solve how does this happen? How does this work? Well, they put an algorithm to work, and within 2 days, it figured out, solved this puzzle that humans couldn't, period. Right? And where is this leading us? This is leading us to much more complex systems, like these robots. So Pepper the robot launched last year, about a year ago, in Japan. sold out in a few minutes. And the special power with this robot is it can read emotions and it can show emotions. Right? So this is much more beyond hydraulic machine that lifts a big heavy part in the factory. This is a companion that could be a companion to your grandmother, right? And in Japan, the average age is already over 60, right? This is very important for that type of culture, that type of society. Now, the last area, which is arguably the most exciting, and I'm a little biased because we're in this business, is 3D transformation. So before Industrial Revolution, everything was done by hand, right? And it was very labor intensive. Industrial Revolution, which took about 80 years, gave us blueprint design and mass production. Internet gave us just-in-time, computer-aided design and just-in-time machine production, and here's approximately where we are right now. So what's coming next is we're talking about completely digital design, completely digital production, right? Nothing, there's no intermediate step. And then ultimately, we're talking about complete democratization of production and manufacturing. We're talking about a magic pipe coming into your house at some point. Next to your electricity and water, you'll have magic dust, and anything you order online will be created for you at your house instantly. So we're talking about no more logistics, no more distribution, no more manufacturing. Everything will be done just in place. And you may think that that's crazy, that's Star Trek, but in about 10 or 20 years, you'll see. You'll remember this. So in May of this year, we announced our first 3D printers, and these are commercial-grade 3D printers. So these are state-of-the-art commercial 3D printers that are now cost-competitive and fast enough for small batch manufacturing. In a few generations, they'll be cost-competitive to replace conventional manufacturing, injection molding, and other technologies. Right? What is this going to mean? It's going to mean that not everything will be made in China anymore. You'll have factories in different countries that are manufacturing goods for that country just in time, just in place, and fully automated, right? Now, what's really interesting is that the way these machines work is it's a concept of a voxel. It's a volumetric pixel. So it's 21 microns at this point, which is about 4 human hairs. And what we can already do is already affect this voxel by voxel with certain types of agents to change the color, to change the transparency very soon, to change the conductivity, right? So what I'm getting to is that we can very soon print complete devices. Now, it's not just a model of something, a crude model, but it's a complete device with batteries, with optics, with all these things. So I'm going to show you a quick video. So hopefully sound will work on how we approach this.
To you, designers and engineers, captains of industry, and leaders of thought, anyone whose ambitions have ever exceeded what was possible, this is your moment. Your rewrite history, the world is not flat moment. Every facet of how you design and manufacture is about to be reinvented, and it all starts here. With the smallest of building blocks, the mighty HP Voxel. You and it are about to change the world by advancing radical prototyping, accelerating manufacturing, and taking precision and strength to unheard of heights. From today forward, the 3D printer is a factory for thought, where the things we make will make us smarter, better, more human. What a future we'll create with new materials and embedded intelligence. Together, we'll bring extraordinary to the everyday and reality to dreams light years away. Welcome to the age of digital production, on demand, a world without waste, without inventory, without warehouses. Meet the first HP Jet Fusion 3D printers, the digital furnaces of the next industrial revolution. Join us as we engineer the never-before voxel by voxel. HP Multi-Jet Fusion. Keep reinventing.
So hopefully HP is a little sexier now, right? It's a little more interesting. My job is complete. So what does this mean for us? What does this mean very, very soon is that we'll be able to print complete devices and pretty complex ones. We'll be able to print complete, electronics, chips, all these things on demand. we're going to be able to do bioprinting. So the combination of a nanobot in your bloodstream will be able to, you wake up and it says, you know, you have a vitamin D deficiency. I printed a pill for you. Here, take this and you'll feel better, right? We're talking about those kind of things. We're talking about, you know, bioprinting of food. Maybe just as good as the cafeteria food you have here. So, that's a local joke. So, we're also talking about something that hasn't been possible yet, which is 4D, a little bit, you know, we call 4D printing. MIT actually is doing research on this, which is smart materials. So that means that an airplane wing might be printed, right? And it will have a material that will react to the air pressure, right? So these are kind of self-assembling materials that react to certain situations. There's a lot of research in that area. And if I blow your mind a little bit further, haptic holography is an interesting area, and maybe this will take many, many years from now, but we're talking about interacting physically with virtual objects. So right now, if you do a little bit of search for this, you'll find that there are already companies working on this for VR, where you wear a glove, and as you touch an object, it will pull your fingers back and you feel like you're touching an object. But at some point, we'll be able to control this virtually and control our neural pathways and be able to interact with virtual objects. So maybe you'll be sitting on virtual furniture in a virtual classroom, you know, 20, 30, 50 years from now, right? So this is kind of where we're headed. And my big point is this, is that you need to plan for what you're going to be working on, where you're going to spend your non-refundable lifetime. And as hopefully our future president says, we're very nervous, actually, I'll tell you. Very, very nervous. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So think about where you're going to invest your career, your life, your talents, what technology you need to learn, and what your dreams are, and dream a little bit bigger, dream into the future. Don't think of today as your context. Think about where the world is headed, right? This is the Silicon Valley mindset. You walk around and you look for problems to solve, right? That's really what it is. Silicon Valley is not a place, it's a mindset. So with that, thank you very much. If you want the slides, you can go to this URL, put in your email, get the slides. You'll also get the first chapter of my book that's coming out in January, which is a little bit of an accelerator in a book. So with that, thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions, but okay. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much.
So now it takes about 20 seconds to come up with a question. We'll give you a second to do that.
I'll come up with the first one, Vitaly. So this first fusion printer, was it designed in-house or was it out of a venture that you invested in?
So our venture group just started in May of this year. I joined the company in March. The 3D printing business unit was put together a couple of years ago. And it's actually, most of the team is actually in Barcelona. So Barcelona and Washington State in the US. It actually comes out of a lot of our 2D printing technology. So we have what's called a page wide, so you can print basically an inkjet that doesn't have a head anymore, but it's one big head, and it sprays at the same time, and the page comes out really fast. So we're doing something very similar, where the dust is spread layer by layer, and then this curing agent is sprayed at very fast speed across the whole bed. So it's actually very similar. Think of it as 2D printing layer by layer. And there's some really cool other technologies out there, like Carbon 3D, that use light to print even faster. So it's a really exciting space.
Magnus?
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I was curious about which of, because you did define different niches for the application of the 3D printing this way. Where would you see that the lowest hanging fruit for you will be? Where will it take off fastest?
I can't claim to be a 3D printing expert, not even close. I'm very lucky to where we are part of the CTO office of HP, and we have people in HP labs that are material science PhDs and everything else. So when I see an interesting company that has a great team, I have a great resource where I can give it to my nerds, and they can tell me if this is an interesting technology or not. But I can say this, that there are a few different technologies that are used for 3D printing itself. So SLS is one We're kind of close to that. Carbon does something entirely different, and a few other ways. And we're looking at all of them. We're looking also at metals and ceramics and other things beyond polymers, beyond plastics. But we're also looking at all of the software that enables this. So for example, we have a really interesting computer that's called a Sprout. And it's a touch computer, but it also has a projector and a 3D scanner camera right in front of it. So you can interact with it in a completely different way. So as you're entering new design paradigms and you're designing new kind of seamless ways and parts and things and kind of a new paradigm of creativity, we're talking about kind of this on-ramp, the creative tools to be able to create these new products in a better way, right? You wouldn't create something in 3D in Photoshop, right? You would do it in some kind of a CAD, but there are more convenient ways that are specialized for this. And the other part of it is, that's really interesting, is that we're going to need to protect this data's intellectual property, right? If somebody gets a hold of your design, they basically have your product, right? So just like, you know, book authors and musicians kind of went through this digitalization of that craft, right? And it had certain problems with piracy and all of those things. We're talking about now that you'll be able to pirate a very complicated device in a few years and print it out at home, right? Those kind of things that we're kind of looking out for. So a lot of really interesting things in this area that we look at.
Hello, Vitaly. Very nice presentation. Thank you very much. I would just like to understand what's the position of HP, I don't know, compared to 3D systems and others. So are you positioning yourself into the industrial part, into the consumer,
Definitely
metallic, polymers? Where actually do you feel, or do you think that it's your sweet spot?
So right now, industrial is the sweet spot, I think, for most companies. There's really, technology is not far enough along to be applicable to consumers. And that's actually a big problem that happened with 3D printing in general. There's a lot of hype a few years ago about 3D printing. And it was a little bit misguided, because how many iPhone cases could you possibly need, right? So there's really no reason for most people to buy a little home 3D printer, because it's just for tinkering. And everybody got disillusioned, right? It's a normal process, right? It's called the trough of disillusionment. And everybody says, oh, 3D printing, that's just buzzwords, it's stupid. But in reality, the application now is commercial, right? And for the next few years, and next few generations of the technology, is going to be eating into small batch manufacturing, then medium, then large scale manufacturing. And at a certain point, the technology will be mature enough to be brought back into the house where the consumers will want to, it'll be like an appliance. You'll be able to print whatever you need, whatever you want. Order a pair of shoes on Amazon or equivalent Amazon of the future, and you print them out, right? We actually already have Adidas as a customer, and they're doing prototyping, right? They can print an entire shoe and test the different designs. So, and we're looking right now at polymers, but we're very interested, and there are a lot of new interesting ideas out there in metals and ceramics. It's just a little bit further behind. It's not quite production ready.
Hello, so thank you for the very nice presentation. As you are in a business school, I wonder what sort of recommendations would you have to our students, they're all business here, given this future, what sort of competences would you say that are absolutely important for them to focus on?
So my recommendation, you know, if you graduate with an MBA, you divide the world into 4 quadrants, right, when you come out. I don't have a business school education. I have the business school education of running 3 of my own companies. And that was tough enough, I can tell you for sure. My recommendation, and you're going to see a lot of top universities, including Stanford already, providing you an ability to learn by doing, right? So for example, there's Stanford StartX Accelerator, which is becoming really, really successful with a lot of companies, where you have academic education. You know, in typical business school, you're studying cases. These cases might be 10, 20, 50 years old, and you're learning kind of about classical things. And you're learning what to do. But only by experience can you learn what not to do. And it's 1,000 things not to do that will kill your company, right? So my recommendation is get some hands-on experience very, very quickly and as much as you can, alongside your education, your formal education. I'm a big proponent of formal education because you need the theory as well. You need that basis. But the experience, you know, if you're choosing, you know, if there's a fork in the road, And your question might be, okay, do I go get a boring government job? Do I go to a big company and kind of work my way up, retire, play golf, and die? Or do I go, you know, towards the siren, the Medusa siren of the startup world, and choose this really hard path? My recommendation is that your first startup should not be your own. You should try to go work for a fast-growing startup that's already in that middle period, in that transition period, where you can learn more in a year than you learn in 10 years trying to do it on your own. And with that experience, you can bring it back and start your own company. And that's kind of the path that I followed, is that I went through a startup that in a year went from, I was, I think, employee number 19 or 20, and we got to about 120. And then too bad that was 2001, when the whole world in Silicon Valley ended. But I learned probably, I don't know, probably half of what I know today is from that experience, kind of hands-on. And it's been reinforced again and again and again as I started and ran 3 of my own companies after that.
Well, thank you. Oh, there's one more. Lisa?
One more question.
2 more.
Hi, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to know, you referred to your 3 companies. What kind of companies are they?
Sure. So I was, my talent, I guess, my calling early on was design. And by the time I was 15, I was the youngest employee of Kinko's, which is now FedEx Office. It used to be kind of small print shops and design houses. So I started there early. I ran a design team in a .com. After that, I ran a printing company, commercial printing and design company for 5 years, sold it, started a design firm, grew to 3 offices and sold that, and then started a real product company, a real startup, software as a service, also in the graphic arts space. And it was an e-commerce platform. And through that, actually, I got to know HP. And that's how I ended up at HP as well. I think there was one last question here.
Thank you, first of all, for your presentation. You talked about technology and how our world will be tomorrow. And I was thinking about how society will react to all of these changes. And you talked about piracy. And in 10, 20 years, people will be able to pirate objects. And imagine if in 10 years, everybody that has a 3D printer can print a gun. How is the world going to be like if that's a possibility? I don't know. I don't think I want to live in a place where everybody that has a PC and a 3D printer will download it.
So I'll make you feel okay on that side. So just because you can doesn't mean you will, right? So Portugal just made all drugs legal, right? And it doesn't mean that everybody is on heroin outside, right? No. It doesn't mean that people will. This is more of like a socioeconomic type of question. And it can't possibly be worse than the gun problem in the US right now, because you don't need to 3D print a gun, you can just go buy one, right? Too easily. But the one thing that does worry me is actually the fact that artificial intelligence is going to start eating into a lot of jobs, right? And those that are not college educated, that are not using their brain for work, are at a big risk, and really in the next 5 years or so already. So, for example, the most popular single profession in the US, does anybody know what it is? Anybody guess? Probably won't guess. It's truck drivers. There are 3 million truck drivers in the US. There are about 5 million people that support them. Little restaurants along the way, gas stations, all these things along the routes. In 5 years, there will be 0 million truck drivers in the US, right? So the agricultural revolution took 240 years, many, many generations, 10 generations. The industrial revolution took 3 generations, about 80 years. We're going to go through a order of magnitude bigger transformation in the next 10, 20 years within the course of 1 generation. And a lot of people will not have the opportunity or the ability to retrain. You're not going to retrain truck drivers that didn't finish high school to be computer programmers, right? So this is actually what keeps me up at night. And it's a little bit scary, and you can already see this effect. Brexit, Trump, all these things, even ISIS, it's the same effect. You have the haves and the have-nots. And there are a lot of have-nots, and there are going to be more of the have-nots than the haves, and they're going to be pissed off because they're not happy with their position in the world, and for them, life is worse. So, you know, this slogan that Trump has, which is "Make America Great Again," couldn't be further from the truth, because if you look at all the statistics, America is much better than it was 8 years ago, economically speaking, but not for a lot of people that feel like they fell out of society, right? And at first it was manufacturing moving to China, but from China, manufacturing is just going to get automated. So I was in Shenzhen just in April, went into a big manufacturing plant. On the first floor, you see a lot of yellow coats, hand assembling everything. You go to we got a tour of the next level, and it's a completely robotic line. It's just managers looking over a few machines. So this is the big problem, and the answer might be something that has to do with basic income, right? Our economic systems, our political systems are going to have to change drastically to keep up with technology kind of eating into the way we work, the way we earn a living. And our economy is going to change drastically. So you can go, so everybody knows TechCrunch, yes? So I'm a contributor to TechCrunch. I actually wrote an article on this a little while back. And if you do a search for it, it's called Trump, Brexit, and ISIS are the symptoms, technology is the problem. So that's my kind of extended thoughts on that. But it's a little scary, yeah, admittedly.
Thank you very much, Vitaly, for this inspiring talk. It's great to have you again in Portugal. Thank you, thank you. Hope to see you next week again. Thanks for coming. And that was okay. So our next keynote speaker, I've already introduced Carlos Silva, a born global company looking at new ways, innovative ways of funding startups, crowdfunding. You may have heard of the theme. Some VCs are worried about what's going to happen. Just as like Vitaly is challenging 3D printing and the way manufacturing will happen, Carlos is challenging the incumbents. So Carlos, tell us about Seeders and what you see. How do you see the future?
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to be here. It's a real pleasure. It's tough to follow 3D printing. 3D printing is pretty cool, and it's going to be really tough to follow that. But whenever I get asked to talk a little bit about my experience, one of the first things that comes to mind is to give some advice. I mean, by building Seeders, certainly I've learned something out of it, and I can share my experience with others. However, there's kind of a theme, that's kind of a recurring theme, like people giving advice. And lots of advice has been repeated over and over and over. And as has just been said, there are a million things that can kill your startup. I can list quite a number of, like problems among founders, lack of focus, poor execution, like the list goes on and on and on. But there's one that I think hasn't been talked about enough. So I'm going to focus on that one, and I'm going to tell the story of Seeders from that point of view. So this is kind of Seeders, a story of blind luck and serendipity. Luck has been hugely underrated. Seeders started with kind of me identifying a problem, which was very hard and to raise capital. I mean, it's not that the capital isn't there, it's that the process itself hasn't really changed in quite some time, and it's a very inefficient process. It's usually connected to who you know, where you are, and whether you can kind of get that message across your own network. It's also slow, and people kind of keep reinventing the wheel. Like when you're at a seed stage level and you have to draft all the legal documents and all that. I mean, there's been a number of people kind of trying to standardize that, but still people kind of reinvent that.
We're having
over
trouble
and over.
listening, so sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me better now? Awesome. So people keep reinventing how they do kind of the legal terms and all that. And I thought it can't be that hard. Like, surely there's a better way to do it. And that's when we started thinking about kind of how can we make the process of raising capital for a startup more efficient, and at the same time, by doing so, how can we open up this asset class to a wider audience? Because at the end of the day, the ability to invest in startups was reserved to those who could invest kind of tickets of at least 50,000 euros. And that's kind of, we're talking about 0.5% of the population. And even those, you need to have the time to actually talk with the companies, talk with entrepreneurs, do the due diligence. It takes time. Not everyone can do that. So that was reserved to a very small percentage of the population. So we looked at it and thought, well, we can, I was kind of looking at crowdfunding platforms and all that. Why can't we do the same for equity? Shouldn't be that hard. Surely there are some issues to be solved, otherwise someone would have done it before. But I mean, I'm just finishing an MBA. My co-founder is an M&A lawyer. I've read through the rule book of financial services. I'm good to go. It won't be that hard. We've built a business plan and built financial projections. So we had everything covered. And we knew that we were going to start, and 1 year after that, we would be launching the platform, getting regulatory approval, and kind of conquer the world. And that was the plan. It didn't really turn out that way, funnily enough. It turns out that it took us 3 years since the moment that we started working on Seedrs till the moment that we actually launched the platform. And that's a very long time for a startup. That's like ridiculously long time for a startup. And what I want to pass here in this kind of the start of the story is that the reason why we started Seedrs was because we were absolutely ignorant. We had no idea about the challenges ahead. We kind of had a few things figured out. We know where we wanted to get to, but we really didn't have an idea of the obstacles that would lay ahead of us. Had we known that, we would probably have done something a lot easier. So we were very lucky about the fact that we had no financial services background and we had no idea what we were getting into. And that's how Seedrs started, by pure ignorance. So after we decided to kind of make this a business, there was a problem of where do we get the money to actually get this off the ground. I mean, we were just finishing business school. I'd spent almost all of my money on the MBA. As you probably are aware, they're not cheap. And I didn't really have the money to kind of bootstrap the company. My co-founder didn't as well. We didn't have a rich uncle that could kind of fund us. So how could we raise the money? And that was kind of complete story of luck and serendipity, because when I moved to Oxford, I obviously rented a house to live at, and it was all taken care through the real estate agency. So I never actually met the landlord. And a few months after that, I got a letter from the landlord saying, well, I'm going to be in Oxford. I would love to stop by, get to know you, and see if everything was okay, just see if you had any questions about the apartment, anything at all. And in good MBA fashion, I just went to LinkedIn, did some research on who he was, and it turns out that he was an investor. He was a business angel investing in tech companies. So at that time, I had a few ideas for a few businesses, all of them pretty silly, but you kind of have to go through that process to understand that it's a silly idea. But I invited him over for tea. I talked to him about the ideas that I had. He told me they were silly, but still I didn't believe him at the time. But we kind of established a relationship, and we kept that relationship alive after that. So it turns out that when I finally had the idea for Seedrs, it was one of the first persons that I talked to and kind of asked for money. And it was our first investor. He ended up being our first investor. So my landlord ended up being the first investor in Seedrs. And what's hidden beneath this kind of initial story is something that I only learned about a year ago. So there we were, the two of us, super happy because finally someone got the idea. Someone believed in that idea enough to invest. We had finally managed to get that message through. Well, he told us, as I said, about a year ago, that actually believe in the idea, and he didn't thought we could pull it off. He thought that we would be unsuccessful. So why did he invest? Because by getting to know me and by getting to know my co-founder, he believed that we were a good team and that eventually we would do something pretty cool. And by being a first investor, he thought that that was kind of a small price to pay to be involved in whatever we decided to do next after we failed in this really stupid idea of starting Seedrs. So that's how we got the first investment. And that was part of what got us going through the process of getting authorization and all that. Again, pure luck. I had no idea this was going on. We then got to a point where we were kind of running out of money. We didn't have the authorization yet. A number of people were telling us that there was no way in hell that the regulator would authorize something like Seedrs. We had raised a few rounds of finance, but mostly small rounds. And as I said, we were kind of running out of money. And we thought, well, we're almost there. We just need a little bit more money, and no one was investing. I think people were getting fed up of the fact that we just kept kind of delaying launch because we couldn't get approval. And we, at that time, we were kind of trying to raise a 500K round, and that wasn't going very well. And at the same time, we applied to the Web Summit. At the time, the Web Summit was in London. So now everyone's about talking like the Web Summit in Lisbon. Before that was in Dublin, but kind of it actually started in London. So we applied to the Web Summit, to their kind of startup competition. And it turns out that by an alignment of planets, the week before the Web Summit happened, the FCA, which is the UK Financial Services regulator, gave us our authorization to operate. And because of that, we ended up winning the Web Summit. And because all of that, we got a lot of press. And because of all that press, all of a sudden, everyone wanted to invest. So in 24 hours, we closed a £1 million round. So that's double of what we were looking for. And we actually managed to kind of send an email to all the people that we were talking about, like, guys, you have to make your minds in 24 hours. Either you're in or you're out. And they were in. So we launched a month after that. We started operating. Initially, we were helping to finance rounds of below kind of £100,000, so pretty small rounds, very early stage, kind of idea stage rounds. We then kind of grown a little bit. We then went to £150,000 rounds, and now our kind of maximum cap, at least for now, is 5 million. So we've grown a little bit. As I said, we started in UK initially, although from day one we had offices in London and in Lisbon. We still have kind of most of our business functions based in London, and then we have all of our engineering and design and product based here in Portugal, in Lisbon. We opened an office in Amsterdam, we opened an office in Berlin, we opened an office in New York, and we're now kind of entering the US. But along the way, and again going back to funding, along the way we were kind of slowly growing in the UK. We're kind of trying to make something happen, but we're still pretty niche. And although nowadays, if you go to the London ecosystem, kind of Seedrs is a household name. It didn't used to be, of course. And we're kind of, again, needing more investment. And that's also an interesting story because we're trying to raise about £2 million at the time. And we were talking with different VCs. And the one that actually was kind of said we're going to invest earlier than all the others was a company that had a venture capital arm. And being kind of a corporate venture capital, the process from when they say, yeah, we love it, we're going to invest, to when they actually sign off on the process can be quite long. So we're kind of going up the ladder and talking with more people and more people. And we got to a point where we were kind of, we had kind of a month and a half of runway left. So we're kind of pretty close to running out of money. But they basically told us, okay, so we're done. All we need right now is the CEO to sign off on it, but this is kind of almost automatic, but he needs to sign off. That's all that we need. So after that, we're going to give you the money. You're going to be fine. You're going to be able to pay salaries. All good. So we're pretty happy at that time. It turns out that we didn't know that there were some political struggles within the company, and there were different points of view between the COO and the CEO, and the CEO refused to sign that. So all of a sudden, the whole round was just collapsed, and we were running out of money. We had a month and a half, and the company was about to die. So what did we do? We decided to raise that round through our own platform. We thought, well, we've built a platform to allow startups to raise capital. We have a number of investors on the platform. Surely someone will be interested in investing in us through the platform. Let's give it a try. We were kind of slightly conservative, so we decided, no, we're not going to try to raise 2 million. That's crazy. Let's try to raise 750K. I think that's feasible. We may be able to pull that within a month or so. So let's give it a try. So we put the campaign together. Hopefully by that time we had learned how to do a crowdfunding campaign. I mean, we were running a platform. We put a campaign together. We launched the campaign at 9 o'clock on a Monday. By 10 o'clock we had reached the target. By noon we were at 1 million. 24 hours later we were at 2 million. We closed at 2.4 million pounds. So that went slightly better than we expected. And actually, it was the best thing that could have happened to us. Because looking back, I think we would have been in a much worse place had we accepted that VC as an investor. We now know that that would have been the wrong choice. And actually having our own users become our investors and having that kind of connection with them has been tremendously helpful. So in hindsight, it ended up being the best possible outcome. And I would love to say that it was because we planned it that way. And I would love to say that it was our foresight that took us there. But it really wasn't. We were kind of lucky. Within that kind of lack of luck of not being able to close the round, we're actually pretty lucky that things turned out that way. And from there, we continued to grow. As I said, we expanded to Europe. We're now operating at a European level. Up till now, we've helped fund over 400 companies with about 190 million being invested through the platform. And I think that it was a mix of all of these things kind of becoming aligned that allowed us to get to where we are. Just to give you some insight into where we are at the moment and some of the numbers, as I said, 400 companies being invested through the platform, over 190 million pounds invested as well. We have investors from 31 countries. And some of the sectors that have raised more rounds through us are kind of food and beverage, finance and payments, travel, leisure, and sports. But interestingly enough, more than the sectors is the fact that like about 11% of our deals come from food and beverage, about 10% come from finance and payments, about 10% as well come from leisure, sports, and travel. And the rest of the categories are like at 9%, 8%, 7%, which means that actually we get deals and businesses from all sorts of sectors, and there's no one dominant sector. And that's something that we didn't foresee. As you can probably understood by now, we're not very good at foreseeing stuff. We just kind of made it up, and it kept going along. So we assumed that most of our businesses would be kind of tech, mobile, web, that kind of stuff. And actually, yes, we do have that. There's a lot of kind of web, tech, and mobile, but they're not dominant in any way. actually we do have lots of more traditional businesses. We do have lots of businesses that are non-digital, and we have everything from kind of very early stage startups all the way to companies that are kind of listed in the stock market. And I think that's a trend that we want to do more and more and more. I mean, we've had companies raise rounds of 50,000 pounds. We have companies now from multiple countries in Europe. We have companies from Portugal raising money through us, which is great. We have Solidar, which is a company that came out of BGI and MIT Portugal, and they've raised 200,000 pounds through us as well. And it's very exciting to see these businesses kind of get off the ground and grow and flourish, because in a way we've kind of allowed them to tap into something that was previously untapped. And I think that, as I was saying, like we have companies from at different stages. The largest round till about a month was a company called Chapel Down, which is actually the largest wine producer in the UK. Again, not a tech business, not mobile, not web, just a winemaker. And they raised about 3 million euros through us. About 4 million pounds through us. And the reason why they did that, so they're a listed company. And the reason why they did that was because, not because they needed the money. Well, they needed the money, obviously. That's why they raised the money. But they could have raised that through the stock market. I mean, there was liquidity there. They could have easily done that. The reason why they raised through us was because they wanted more than just the money. They wanted to connect with their clients. They wanted to connect with their consumers. They wanted to create a strong bond between those who love the brand and were consuming their products and their investors, their investor base. They wanted to be able to invite them to the wineries. They wanted to be able to promote new wines to them, and they wanted to foster that relationship. And that's a big part of why companies raise money through equity crowdfunding. It's not just because of the money. In the same way that you don't raise money from a good business angel or a good VC just because of the money, it's also because you want more than that. You want the network, you want the advice, you want the help in raising the next round. The same applies to equity crowdfunding. It's not just about the money. It's what you can get on top of it. It's the connection to your user base. It's the ability to promote your product through PR and through a huge fan base that are going to stick with you no matter what because they've invested in you. It's a way to also validate your product and your service. And I think that's kind of the story. I think that we're now at a point where we're financing kind of larger and larger rounds. The reason why we're sticking to 5 million is because more than that you need to actually issue a financial prospectus, and that's slightly more complicated. But the big vision is we wanted to create a platform that allowed anyone in the world to invest in companies anywhere else in the world, because there's money everywhere and there's talent everywhere, and we wanted to be able to connect these two regardless of where they are in the world, and we wanted to make that process as seamless and as efficient as possible. And we started with UK, we're now in Europe, soon we'll be the first pan-European equity crowdfunding platform, and we expect to be a global company sometime in the future as well. So sorry if I was boring, I hope I wasn't. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions?
Thank you. I have a question that's related to crowdfunding, and I work with lots of companies, and most of them are quite techy companies where the crowdfunding may not be the route because it takes an understanding of who's going to invest. And you also mentioned that most of your deal flow, or the ones that you help, is food or sports equipment that is easy to understand for anyone. How would you see crowdfunding as a source of capital for those that are, I would say, slightly more complicated technologies than agri-tech or food tech or things like that?
So that's actually a very good question, and I've gotten that question a number of times before. There are certain kinds of businesses that are not suitable for equity crowdfunding, either because they're too capital intensive or because they are indeed too technical and too complicated. Having said that, my experience is that 90% of the businesses that are supposedly too tech to be funded through equity crowdfunding, actually their founders are trying to sell the wrong thing. Because at the end of the day, what you're selling is not necessarily the technology. It's the experience and it's the value. And that should be easy to explain. If you're not able to explain that, there are, of course, exceptions. Like if you're developing a new drug, that's very specific. But in most cases, what you have to be able to explain in a very simple way is what kind of value do you add to people's lives or to businesses. And the underlying technology is just a means to provide that value. And you may have to be able to explain that to an investor who's investing 100K or $1 million. But for that, you can also kind of communicate directly with those investors through the platform and go a little bit more in depth. But for an investor who's willing to invest like 500 or 1,000 and want to diversify into 30 or 40 or 50 companies, that doesn't really matter. All they need to is to believe in the team and to see the value of what that team is creating. And that should be simple to explain.
I've got a question, Carlos, which is inevitable, not an easy one. Brexit.
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, okay.
No. That's a very good question. Actually, I was in Berlin to talk in a panel on the day right after Brexit, and I knew when I woke up and I read the newspaper, like, damn, I'm gonna have to answer this. So, yeah, Brexit. It's really silly what happened. I don't think anyone expected that. I don't think the Brexit supporters expected that. It's obviously bad for everyone, for the UK, for Europe, for the world as a whole, because it kind of reflects a trend that is quite dangerous in my perspective. In terms of seeders, there are certain effects. I mean, we saw kind of a slight dip in terms of investment right after Brexit, because a lot of our investors are executives in the city, and all of a sudden they were worried about their future. But having said that, I mean, October has been an amazing month for us, so that has kind of bounced back. I think that the main effect of it right now is uncertainty and volatility. As for the future, it's anyone's guess. No one really knows what's going to happen. But what we do know is that we built Seeders to be a cross-border platform. And it's a lot easier for us to be regulated in the UK and be able to operate in Europe. But we actually had to get regulated in the US, and we're going to have to get regulated in other countries as well. So from our perspective, this is just another border that we have to cross, and we're already working on eventually being regulated outside of the UK and continental Europe. So we're speeding up the process. It's annoying, but it's not critical for us.
I have one question, which is, thank you first of all for the presentation, which is, as I understand, you guys represent investors in the board. Is it correct or not? Yes or no?
No.
No.
But you can continue the question.
Yeah,
and then
so
I'll
when you have, imagine, 200 investors on one company, and they raised, and I don't know, they acquired 20% of the company or something like that. So how then do you manage all? After that, the investment in the company, that's number one. Number two, if things go wrong, how can you explain that to all the investors, and what's the liabilities of all of those things?
Okay.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. So in terms of your first question, do we see it on the board? No. And the reason why we don't is because kind of that's what VCs and angels end up doing. They see it on the board. But that's a business that is very, very difficult to scale. There's only so many boards that you can see that. And you have to dedicate time, and you have to dedicate a lot to that process. And we're a scale business, so that doesn't work for us. We're not here to kind of replace angels and VCs. We're here to complement them. So most of our best companies kind of raise money at the same time from through seeders and through VCs and through eventually angels, and eventually it's the VC that sits on the board and we don't. Having said that, in terms of managing like hundreds of investors, so in the round where we raised 2.4 million pounds, we got over 900 investors. That's a lot. And managing that directly as an entrepreneur is a headache. However, what we do is we act as nominees for all those investors. So we're kind of legal representatives of those investors. We group them together, and we're kind of the legal investor in that company. So we're the ones kind of doing all the legal due diligence, executing the deal, kind of communicating with the entrepreneur and all that. We take care of that. And we've built our own software to be able to manage that in a seamless way. The entrepreneur can still and should talk with his investors, with the underlying investors, and the investors still talk with the entrepreneur. They can do that through the platform, or they can do that directly. But in the back end, we're taking care of all the paperwork, and we stay with the business all the way to an exit.
So you follow the business as well?
We follow the business, but we don't sit on the board.
So you are following 400 businesses or something?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but
Imagine that you scale to 1 million.
Yeah. We're way more light touch than a VC. So as I said, we don't do that kind of deal. What we do is we have to be able to get information from the businesses, and that's kind of something that they push to us, and distribute that to the investors, and also act in certain situations. So whenever if the business is winding down, we have to do something. If the business is selling, we have to do something. But that doesn't scale linearly. So we have to increase our team, but there's not a direct linear correlation with the number of businesses. Okay.
Thank you.
Just one question. Thank you for the presentation. Have you ever thought seriously about giving up? And is there something you really think you should have done completely different?
That's a very good question. The second one is actually a lot easier to answer. Is there something that I should have done differently? Yeah, tons of stuff. Lots and lots of stuff. Like if I were to start a business now, I would do like 70% of things differently. I mean, what's the point of actually kind of going through that process if you're not learning about it? So I feel like I'm a much, much better entrepreneur now than I was when I started. So a million mistakes that we've made. What was the...
The question was whether you ever seriously thought about
giving up. Yeah, I mean, you go through that. And that's one of the things that entrepreneurs never talk about, because like we're always in pitch mode, selling mode, where it's like everything is awesome, we're going to make it and all that. But you go through that. It's a roller coaster. And that's why I think it's so important to pick the right co-founder, because the co-founder is the only person that you can actually talk openly about those things. So it's really important to have a co-founder that is able to back you up and lift you up when you're down, and that you can do the other way around as well. And the other thing is, if you're doing a startup for the money, don't do it. Just do something else. Because statistically speaking, starting a company because you want to get rich is a really, really stupid idea. There are much better ways, much safer ways to make money. If you think that 1 out of 8 companies is successful, it works to diversify for a VC, but as an entrepreneur, and you can only build so many companies within your lifespan, it's a really, really, really bad call. So yeah, money is important, but at the end of the day, you have to be doing that for something else, because you're passionate, because you love what you're doing, because you have a vision, because you want to make something and you want to leave something for your kids or for future generations. If it's just about the money, you're going to give up.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Excelente história. Obrigado, obrigado. Desculpa. Okay. So for those in the audience that feel like talking, please stand up and leave the room. For those that are interested in the session, stay quiet. Okay? If you feel like talking, please stand up and leave the room. Podes passar. Sim. Sim?
A new economy needs to be created.
Espera aí, ponto número 1, nós não queremos passar o vídeo com esta confusão toda. Mas é bom, mas deixá-los assentar, se passar o vídeo no meio desta confusão, as pessoas não conseguem. Primeiro o som está bom? Tá? Hã? No break. Hello, good afternoon everyone. I will just, there's no break right now, so I know that some of you are leaving, but I would just ask you to do it fast and quiet, okay? I'm Sofia Fernandez. I'll just, just sit. I'm Sofia Fernandez. I'm responsible for marketing and communication of BGI. And right now we are going to, I don't know if you know fully what we are doing here, but today 7 startups are going to present, and this more than a business opportunity or an academic work, this might be an opportunity for you to get to know some companies, the reality they are in, and also what are their business. So right now we are going to show a video about the 7th edition of the startups that are working with BGI. So what? We can show the video right now.
And business, strong foundations. We need both to succeed.
A new economy needs to be created.
Look at what's around you, transform a challenge in an idea into a prototype into a startup.
Technology-based startup is a very complex business. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, so fostering is fundamental to avoid doing mistakes that others have done.
BGI can really help you. They have a dedicated team of well-connected individuals who've had their own experiences in building businesses, who can actually teach us how to apply that in our day-to-day startups.
Thank you.
It's like a miniature MBA program. The students truly learn all of the fundamentals around building their company, thinking about intellectual property, all the way through to understanding profitability.
You are confronted with your own fears. How solid is your project? How well is it organized?
A very good framework to help us question all our assumptions.
Learn how to pitch our ideas. The business model in a short period of time. Industry 4.0 with a simple communication.
Disruptive technology
that others can understand in a much better way.
This forces the entrepreneurs to do a lot of the rethinking of their value proposition on their own, which is a really good skill for them to be learning.
I got the opportunity to think beyond the research how we can take our idea, our innovation to the market.
The cross-pollination that you get in BGI is really quite unique.
The innovation really came from mixing different frameworks or different ideas or different knowledge dimensions.
Covering a broad spectrum of technology spaces and industries, of level of development and countries of origin.
You don't need to be a super manager, a super financial, super accountant, but you need to have the capability to select the right people to join you.
Investors prefer to invest in a great team, even if it might not be the most fantastic technology or products in the world, than investing in the most fantastic technology or product in the world without the right team.
Because a great team can make something out of almost nothing. Just like a great artist, just give them a pencil and they'll be able to create a wonderful sketch. BGI has been doing an amazing job of really promoting and fostering entrepreneurship from the idea to the first funding.
And you have to be ready with resources to take them along the life cycle.
The big challenge is really scaling up, as it says there.
It's actually a good moment to be here and to invest.
It's good to be in the middle of this ecosystem that is being built. Anything is possible.
Building global innovators.
Okay, so that's great. And right now we are going to start our presentations. I will just remind the teams that they will have 7 minutes, and we will be counting the 7 minutes. And the first and lucky ones to be the first is PCPR with Nuno Freitas, and I guess it's going to be saving a lot of lives right now, so just get prepared, okay? Yes.
Be professional.
Great.
Okay. André. Okay. Yeah, it seems it's turned off. Can you hear me? No. This is on, isn't it? Good afternoon. Okay. So good afternoon. When the heart stops beating, PCPR starts sensing. What's this? I'm Nuno. I'm an emergency doctor, and I'm the founder of PCPR. And I'd like to talk to you about cardiac arrest. I think that all of us have an idea about cardiac arrest. Briefly, the heart stops. And the point is that we want to know more, and we want also to engage with you. So we have some voting system there. Would you help us telling how many people do you think are affected by cardiac arrest, suffer a cardiac arrest in the world? So for those of you who have this voting system, just vote, please. All right, you have voted. Thank you. And a lot of you think that's 4 million people, 4 million people in the world. Yeah, thank you for your feedback. And for those who are affected, how many do you think will die from the cardiac arrest? All of them? 30%? 60%? Please vote again. %60%. Well, no, in fact, it's 90%. Thank you again for your feedback. It's a huge problem. Cardiac arrest is a huge global problem. We know that 9 out of 10 people, it's the international average, will die after a cardiac arrest. 4 million people are affected each year. And it can happen to anyone, anywhere. Even you can suffer a cardiac arrest. It's true that we have more than 5,000 hospitals in Europe, a lot of them acute care hospitals, and another 5,000 in the US. And emergency ambulances, we hold more than 200,000 in the developed world. But still, 9 out of 10 people will die after a cardiac arrest. The point is that the emergency teams, they really don't get the right clinical information at the right time. It's the 20 minutes golden time. It's an emergency. And technology is not helping much. We know that feedback is the gap. It looks like the age of Apollo 13. Do you remember the question, Houston, we have a problem? So in cardiac arrest, emergency teams like us, we shout this, Houston, we have a problem. And usually we get the same answer from the technology. Say it again, please. And this must change. And we know that the technology can do much better, and we want to do better. Because the American Heart Association has a consensus stating we must have quality CPR. This saves lives. And the Institute of Medicine, they have a report from 2015 saying time to act. So we want to do better. That's why we propose PCPR. PCPR is a portable, precise, and patent now medical device to properly assist emergency teams. It's a thoracic pad with sensors that doctors, nurses, and paramedics apply directly to the patient. And a new monitor display to guide and support the emergency teams during their critical decision-making and their goal-directed therapy. PCPR wants to be the reference, not the gold standard, will be there, but the reference on innovation in every hospital, emergency room, in every emergency ambulance, and in the bags of the emergency teams. We value real-time feedback, but based on physiological indicators, a new set of indicators. And with non-invasive sensors, we don't have the time to get invasive sensors in these patients. So we must rely on non-invasive patients. And we must get also data, clinical data, from this episode, because it will go further to the hospital and even to the world. So this is our value proposition. The most important, we want a real impact on long-term outcomes. The outcomes are not only survival, but the quality of life of these patients, neurological quality, cardiological quality. These are the long-term outcomes that we want to impact. Yes, we can feedback. This is our main focus. We are focusing based on regional oximetry. We have developed a new near-infrared spectroscopy for cerebral oximetry. And this is our unique selling point. Another unique selling point is that we want, with a new algorithm, a goal-directed therapy, guidance. We'll have teams being guided with our assistive device. That's why we say properly assisting emergency teams. And then we'll have the personalized care. We already have in the market some pads, medical pads, but usually they have some electrical capacity, but really no feedback, no physiological feedback. So we can apply it to the patient, but we only give them electricity. No feedback from the patient. And we have this kind of monitors from the competition, quite heavy ones. We carry them in the streets. And these monitors cost 30,000 euros for the assistive device in the streets or in the emergency room. And this is the kind of thing that we want to change, because we have spoken, this is why our project was born, with the professionals, with the emergency professionals, and 93% told us, look, we want a better device for assisting medicine. We want physiology feedback and indicators for our device, and we cannot get it now with the current solutions. So we are targeting a very competitive landscape. We know this is a 2 billion addressable market, the ALS defibrillator market, and CPR is heading there, competing with Philips and Zoll and Physiocontrol, and a lot of other, and they sold last year 163,000 defibrillator units. It's a lot of units, and we want 3% of this market. This is our goal. We'll be not only the innovative ones in the market, but we also have a combined solution with the new monitor device, with the sensing pads, and the software for the emergency data management. So it's one vertical, yes, the emergency vertical, with hospitals and health networks and out-of-hospital ambulances and the emergency data management. It's the same vertical, but with 3 different revenues for being a much stronger project. So we have just completed now 2 great milestones. We have a grant from SME Instrument Phase 1 directly in the European Commission, more than 300 projects under the health sector. We were the 7th. We were not the best. We'll be the best. But we were the 7th project, and we won the grant. And now we have a patent, the thoracic pad. We have a patent since 2 days ago. We wanted to say it to you. And our roadmap is clear for the future. So we are heading to SMA instrument phase 2 because we want to develop not only the prototype, but the go-to-market plan. We have 2 years to make this happen. And we'll have this funding from SMA instrument phase 2. We are also shifting our ideas. We want to do the field trials with the Caixa Capital, 100K. We'll want to do the field trials in Italy and Germany because we have spoken with their local visitation councils and they are willing to test our prototype. So our road ahead is clear. Our team comes from MedSimLab. Our company already has a lot of clients from the emergency sector. Last year, we hit a revenue of 2 million euros. It was our record revenue. And we have this kind of full skills approach. Medical doctors, biomedical engineers, software developers, sales managers, all came from MedSimLab. Now we have the advisory board, and a fantastic advisory board, and fantastic mentors like Antonio Diniz and Isaac from BGI. So our team is growing, and we hope that next year will be a much stronger project with a spin-off. Lastly, last words to say that this was only a metaphor about feedback. But when you are on the streets and you really know the impact between life and death from physiological feedback, you want some new device, new assistive device. This is PCPR life again. Thank you.